at the end of that session. Fingers crossed that we have some dry running today.
Yes, good morning again to you, Jess, and you made me dive on the app to have a closer look at what's going to happen, but there'll be a wild southerly change come through later on this evening, and that's going to spice things up. There'll be the inevitable wind direction change here. Very high winds forecast and quite a bit of rain, but right now, cloud cover, cooler conditions out there at the moment, very similar to the way in which they ran. You had an image up there just a few moments ago of the legendary Dick Johnson, three-time Bathurst winner, a couple of times runner-up there, and images also at Cam's race control. Driving Standards Advisor Craig Baird in there together with Cam's race director Tim Schenken. Tyrepower Tasmania SuperSprint. This is practice 1. We had effectively practice 0 earlier for the additional drivers that we're going to see in the Pertec Enduro Cup later in the year. Thanks to Virgin Australia, a closer look at Symmons Plains Raceway. Opened in 1969. We're celebrating 50 years, 5 decades at this venue. And the championship, its 47th visit here this weekend. A couple of years where we missed it along the way. Practice record held by Jamie Whincup. Simple track on paper, not so simple to master. Need to be able to brake cleanly, effectively, and very late in 2 spots here at 4 and 6. And correspondingly get the power down, which with a car with more than 600 horsepower is not an easy thing to do. Big rise in the road over the top of turn 1. Very rarely a passing opportunity unless there's an enormous mistake at 1 and 2. Underneath the bridge through 3, glide the car up against those rivets on the fence on the left-hand side. Big stopping power required to get the car turned and stopped at turn 4. And then the run down the back straight out of that hairpin brings you up to plus 260 kilometres an hour. And 6 and 7 are effectively the one corner in the way in which the car sees it, and certainly the way the tyres feel it around here, as the right rear works pretty hard. 3 sectors. The first of those is in the braking area at turn 4 at the hairpin. The second sector is effectively a speed trap reference, the end of what we call the back straight, which isn't. And then it brings you back onto the start-finish line area. That's the view looking up towards the northwest. On the horizon up there is Launceston Airport. We're about 30 kilometres to the south of Launceston on the main highway between Launceston and Hobart. Back in familiar territory now, Scott McLaughlin, who was on the inside of turn 4 for us in the previous practice session, did a great job down there. So he's now back at the helm of car number 17 for Shell V-Power Racing. He's been off to a brilliant start in 2019. But for that bizarre circumstance in Melbourne where he and Cam Waters tangled in the races that he has participated in, undefeated. So he's got 500 points to his credit at the moment. He's in pretty good shape. Cam Waters, who I just made reference to. Car number 6, Monster Energy Ford Mustang. And tangled with McLaughlin the warm-up lap. The Australian Grand Prix support events. He's got off to a great start so far this year and has got good points to his name and has been showing good pace. Not off to a good start down there though at turn 6. Has locked up the inside front and just run wide into the gravel. Put some junk on those tyres. Very easily done there. The velocity of the cars at that point is very quick, more than 70 metres a second under brakes. When you reach for the brake pedal down there, here he is having a take 2 on that one. And you can see that it's not exactly smooth there either. Bit of congestion also on the run up to the hairpin, something that we've got to keep an eye out. Chaz Mostert down the inside of Jack Smith. Chaz has just come back from Laguna Seca where he drove in the Schnitzer BMW GT car in California. Finished in 5th, a race that was won by Tim Slade driving the Ferrari to the airport yesterday with Tim, and so that was a nice break for him, an enjoyable track for them to visit. Another lock up on the inside front. This time the sister car, and Mostert runs wide down at turn 6. So there's a little epidemic there. Gets back on cleanly. Didn't run off quite as far as Cam Waters. Mark Scaife jumps back into the commentary box, and one of the things that can impact that, although I'm looking out the window and swallowing my words, is I was going to say wind direction can be an issue down there on occasion, Mark, but it's very easy to overstep the braking marker down there at turn 6. Morning and welcome.
Yeah, morning, Neil. And it is very much wind dependent, but it's not at the moment, I don't think, having much effect. It's right on the verge of raining. When I was walking back from the host position then, it's got that feeling of a little sprinkle in the air. And the other thing that I'm interested in is getting a feel for the lead drivers now and understanding that level of grip, because these conditions, normally when it's overcast here and it's cool, the circuit is fast. And we saw Tander quite quick in the previous session. And we'll get a feel pretty quickly here as to what Jamie Whincup and Van Gisbergen and McLaughlin, who's now gone to the top with the 51.38, what they do in terms of tyre condition and overall track grip. There's Mostert. There's a great shot from the rear there, and how unstable. So have a look at the braking difference there. What's happened at the start of this stop? We're going on board. Have a look. So what happens here is that it actually started with rear instability. He couldn't slow the car enough, and then he's still trying to stop it when he goes to turn left, which ends up locking the left-hand front and off the road. So that was actually, it come from the back of the car initially, Davison with a very similar scenario.
So all cars out of the same squad, so they'll have the same setup disease. There'll be just something not quite right there. They'll either be bottomed out in the front travel and the rate goes up, but interesting that all three of those cars that we've seen in replay in strife at turn 6 are all from Tickford. I just jumped on to have a look at what the current conditions are at the airport, just to your point. It's only a few kilometres from here. It's 12 degrees up there at the moment. The wind is from the northwest, I beg your pardon, from the southwest at 8 knots, so it's about 15 kilometres an hour, but pretty low cloud cover out there at the moment, and big weather due later on today. There's a big cold front off to the west at the moment. That'll make things pretty lively here in the evening.
So what happens, explain to me what happens off the back of the Parc Ferme conditions out of qualifying, because if, for instance, you have to roll straight into the wet, will they be able to resolve or change the car as a consequence of that rule?
I think not.
Yeah. So if you pop out of qualifying with a great dry weather one-lap car and you've got to line up in a wet race, that's going to be fun.
Just go for about another 5 seconds while I get to the page that I need to find here on this, if you don't mind.
Okay.
But, yes, Mark, I can speak with great authority on that now. So the bottom line is that I'm not going to read through the list because it starts at 13.5.2 in the supplementary regulations for this event, and it finishes at 13.5.217.
Yes.
In other words, there's quite a bit to digest here, folks, so I'll be succinct and answer Mark's question. We can't do much. So you're allowed to give it a bit of a polish, chuck some water, pump the tyres up, kick it in the sill panel and send it. That's about it. If you want to do much more than that, you're going to have to go and beg the headmaster. And I reckon Adrian, who's the head of motorsport for Supercars, is most likely to say no.
Well, that's what Jesse Yates was just saying, that the whole of pit lane will be politicking with Adrian to see what you can get away with, buying him a coffee.
It'd take more than coffee to be able to get away with the things that they'll want to change.
Exactly. It might be an invite for dinner.
So this is David Reynolds, car number 9 on screen here, Penrite Racing, running the high line at turn 4. Someone running even higher, I think, was Jack Smith in the background. Wildcard entry this weekend, making it 25 cars in the total field. I reckon that was a spot of rain on the lens of the camera there out of turn 4. Inside the garage at Penrite Racing. In the background you can see Luke Youlden and Will Brown down there. And they were out in the additional driver session a bit earlier on, and that squad stayed the same year on year. It didn't stay the same in poise through turn 7 for David Reynolds. Got it cranked nice and sideways. Mind you, good lap. He's just finished on a 51.1, 4/100ths of a second slower than the fastest time set so far by Whincup. And he's got a fair shining. I haven't actually seen Luke this weekend, but I'll be asking what the basis of that is when I catch up with him. Who thumped you and why?
They know what we're talking about, the boys. That young Will Brown is a really good young bloke. He's a lot of fun, and I thought he drove very well in the previous session, actually, so that was a good job.
That's a fair
shiner, isn't it? It looks like he's been... Oh, how's that for a slide?
That could result in a fair shiner if that continues as well for James Courtney through turn 7. So they've been having a little challenge just acclimatising to the change in spring rules this year, where the twin spring's been banned and they're back to a single spring. They can make either end of the car do what they logically want it to do. They've been having a battle getting both ends to do it. Check it out on the replay. So it just starts to crank sideways as James picks up the throttle.
Good save.
Nice work. So he presses on, and he's currently in position number 10 On a 51.4, he's 0.3 of a second away. So a bit of opposite lock, grabs it and slides out the other side. So in pretty good shape at this racetrack in years gone by, James Courtney. He's the oldest driver in the field now, believe it or not.
And Gisbergen out of the car and now jumping back on board. Van Gisbergen at the moment is 6th. So Whincup currently fastest from McLaughlin and Dave Reynolds. Andy?
Luke Jordan, we just saw some shots of this shiner that's happening here, mate. Looks pretty fresh. Did that happen after the co-driver session? Was Dave not happy with your performance?
Dave was okay. It was Betty. This is all Betty.
Oh, really? Jeez.
Don't put it on P1. This is what happens at Aerobest. The pressure's on this year.
I'm sure not, mate. You and Dave are a formidable combination. How did your run this morning go, just quickly?
Yeah, really well, actually. Felt pretty comfortable in the car. I haven't done a huge amount of laps around here, to be honest. I mean, I've been racing V8s for 20 years, and I've probably only done maybe 10 laps around here, so it was good to blow out the cobwebs and have a bit of a run. Yeah, I mean, October feels like a long way away, so any time to get more laps in these cars, the better.
Thanks, Luke.
Cheers.
Luke Jordan, Will Brown. They'll be driving in the Pertec Enduro Cup come Bathurst, Gold Coast and Sandown. Rick Kelly, Castrol Racing, Nissan Altima. Little changes year on year with that car aerodynamically. Change to the back of the front wing or splitter, and a little change to the rear wing gurney. And that's proved to be a little challenge for them. It's moved what's described as the centre of pressure in that car. Just goes to underscore how sensitive these things are. The refinement in the way in which the cars are matched is so tight. And when little changes are made, it's a bit of a challenge trying to master them. So that's been the challenge so far this year for Rick Kelly. And when you look at what's going on, he's down in 20th position points-wise. Now, remember in the previous session, Garth Tander was driving Shane Van Gisbergen's car, so he's either left a present for him or he didn't leave the seat back in the exact same position. So Shane slept out of it just to make sure that everything's exactly as he wants it. And that was the reason why. So looking at this on replay as to why Shane went back into the garage for a fiddle with the seat. So Whincup is the fastest on a 51 flat, and then the next group of cars, positions 2 through 6, are actually all in the garage, including Shane Van Gisbergen. Back to live pictures. Now Mostert is 7th fastest. Pye, then Winterbottom and Courtney. Todd Hazelwood in this 888 built Holden Commodore has got off to a pretty damn good start this year, hasn't he? 16th in the championship, and the change of equipment, and we all raised our eyebrows last year at Tailem Bend when they went from one brand to another, because that's a big task. I mean, changing little things in the car can have big impacts, as I said a few moments ago, when you go from one brand to another and then into another car again in 2019, as they've done at Mattstone Racing. That's a very big ask, but they've actually done a really nice job of that. New colours this weekend also for Nick Percat. Dunlop on the car for Brad Jones Racing.
And your point about Todd Hazelwood, remember on the Sunday of Adelaide, going into the top 10 qualifying shootout, he was the fastest of all the 888 cars. So he's done an extraordinary job. He's on board now with Whincup. Nice save there. We saw James Courtney. Whoa, that was a nice save also. That was like a Scandinavian flick. He was sideways out to the left, flicking to the right, got himself saved over the top of the rise, and there's Macaulay Jones just dribbling off that turn 4. He was pretty lucky there to only have effectively half the car into the runoff and into the debris. Just making his way back out again now.
Yeah, if you end up with all 4 in the gravel up there, you inevitably end up throwing the safety car boards and flags out, or they'll stop the session, safety car in the race, but they'll stop the session in practice to be able to drag it out. Let's get back down to the pit lane.
I just want to make sure that before you guys get in, that had nothing to do with my brake preparation down there for Macaulay Jones into the hairpin, all right?
Oh,
Never
Greg,
we
didn't even
I may have
think
been at the brakes, but I did a beautiful job of it, so it's nothing to do with me.
We didn't even think that,
I
Greg.
didn't go off down there, did I?
No, you didn't. But you weren't braking late enough to go off, I don't think.
That hurts, but it's fair. It's fair.
Written, spoken and authorised by. Here's the replay of what happened to Macaulay Jones. So a lot of brake pressure early on, and it's locked up, and then he's released the pedal in order to be able to avoid damaging those tyres, and that's elongated the stopping distance and pitched him into the gravel down there. And if you're wondering why Greg's chiming in on that conversation, Greg Murphy had the opportunity to drive the car in the additional driver session, did a nice job too. Got into the 51s. Not an easy thing to do, to be able to just get in the cars and get straight on it. So the Cool Drive car, they've had their traumas inside the garage, and actually had a moment earlier this weekend to have a conversation with both Brad and Macaulay about the season thus far. That'll be a part of our coverage this weekend. Remembering that Macaulay got in strife when they had a brake problem with the car in Adelaide at turn 9, brake failure. They lost that car, so it's a different chassis. Back to the Shell V-Power racing car now, and this is Fabian Coulthard on the run into turn 4. Oh, and half spin for him down there, so getting these things stopped. And he's had a long, hard think about which way he wanted to flick then to get it into the corner. Did a nice job of sorting it all back out. Van Gisbergen's on a great lap, so he's been the fastest so far on a 51.07, and he's about to move that number again. So he's the first in the 50s this weekend. 50.97 for Shane Van Gisbergen. And he's got himself comfortable back in the saddle there. So 19 victories coming into this weekend for Red Bull 888 Race Engineering. And you think about Wincup's performance here has just been crazy. 7 poles and 12 victories. Andrew Jones.
Neil, you just referenced SVG's comfort, not only with the car balance, but also with his seat insert. So I've just gone and grabbed, pretty self-explanatory, Garth's insert out of that car from the co-driver session this morning. I'm going to try and run that in there for SVG. Hopefully he was comfortable with it. He wasn't. They flung it, and he's just gone to the top of the timesheets. Yeah,
it's important. Thanks, Andy. It's important to be comfortable any time, but around here the braking forces are so high that stop at turn 4 and the stop down at turn 6 are massive. So if you haven't actually got the posture right and the ergonomics right, it makes a massive difference. Now, you can see the SVG, he's bluing with Jack LeBrock. Now, we've just had a look, and very, very closely, at their asymmetric setup of these cars. So what's going to really play a big part this weekend is how little camber they're using on the left-hand side of the car, at the front and primarily at the back. So they've stood the left-hand rear wheel up, so there's hardly any camber. Watch this. So have a look at the right-hand side wheels, and the left-hand rear wheel is hardly got any camber on it. And what that does, it actually creates a yaw moment because they've got a different contact patch from one side of the car to the other. So they're all talking about brake instability. A lot of that instability will come from the differing camber settings.
And the working side's the right-hand side round here, so hence more camber, which is offsetting the angle of the wheels on the outside of the car to compensate for the tyre distortion, and it's evident there on that shot. So pretty substantial. So the lazy side of the car in this case is the left side, and it's standing up by comparison. Little tricks that you apply to the car to customise its setup going into each of the locations that we go to. And this has got some unique aspects, this racetrack, with the very slow run down into here, into the turn 4 hairpin, and then the high-speed run up the back straight, the big premium on brakes. That's, I think, the second time now that we've seen Fabian Coulthard in trouble down there. Luckily, he's been able to keep it on the black down there. If he ends up a little further wide down there on the gravel, he won't be able to rejoin as readily. So fastest time set by Shane Van Gisbergen, a 50.97. Reynolds has done a 51.07. So it's Van Gis, Reynolds, Whincup, McLaughlin. There's 0.13 covering the top 4 cars at the moment. Then Pye, Coulthard on the replay. Followed by De Pasquale, Winterbottom, Courtney and Mostert. Now Tim Slade here in the Freightliner car after a strong run at the Australian Grand Prix in Melbourne and winning in California last weekend in the GT car. He didn't actually lock up. He just ran wide down there. He recognised that his closing pace was too great, and he's just released the brake pedal and protected those tyres. They've got 16. I was looking at this number 14. They've got 16 of the Dunlop Super Soft tyres available to them, pre-marked for these practice sessions.
Young Neil, one of the things technically, I know that we don't like to propel ahead too hard, but the twin spring around here was a really powerful tuning tool, wasn't it? It helped the cars under brakes, and it helped the cars in terms of traction coming off the corner. They were the two things that effectively tricked it. What a great slide. Beautiful car control. When you make the grass, it always, you have a little cringe, don't you? Is that almost full opposite lock?
I was about to say that's pretty close to the lock stop. So
James Golding right out sideways.
I don't think James is thinking there's any great beauty in that at the moment.
Nah.
He got away with it.
Well, there's only two things that happen from there. You either go on the right-hand fence or the left-hand fence. That's the next step in that. He did a really nice job to save that. But I think the twin spring thing is playing a much bigger role so far in the dynamics of the car. So we've seen the difference from one side of the car to the other, but what we're seeing is a lot of instability under brakes and a lot of wheel spin coming off the corner. And listening to the radio chat, everyone's blowing about the traction coming out of the hairpin.
Been asked several times the basis of that change year on year. There was an overwhelming feeling amongst many of the teams that the amount of time to manage the twin spring and set it up was disproportionate and taking and diverting resources. So a couple of people said to me, surely that can't be about the cost of the springs, and no, it's got nothing to do. It was never the cost. It was always the diversion in labour, and so there've been various teams over quite a long period of time have been really vocal about just how much it diverts attention from getting on with the limited resources of the people that are permitted to work at the racetrack when there's other things to do with the cars. Andrew?
Neil and Mark, you were making comments before about some of the camber adjustments that are going on, so I thought I'd grab a wheel and a tyre and try and visually show what happens when we crank some camber on. So at the moment, this wheel is sitting really neutral. The contact patch of the tyre here is sitting flush with the ground. So I heard Mark make reference that when we put more camber on into the car or onto the car, it actually cranks the wheel over like this. Now, I'm exaggerating it, but when we see under the wheel there, you can have a look. When it's in a straight line, there's very little tyre touching the road. But as they get down to the hairpin and they turn the car to the left, what it's doing is actually loading the car back out, but it'll also keep a little bit of that tyre off the ground. It'll do two things. It'll give it a little bit of balance in the rear of the car, but it'll also free it up as well when they crank some steering into it and enable the cars to turn into that corner a little bit more balanced.
Thanks, Andrew. It's done to compensate for what is massive tyre distortion. We've seen some incredible super slow-mo replays where you see the tyre fully distorted off the bottom of the rim. And that's what it's about. The camber's there to try and compensate for that. Because if you think about it in very simple terms, and that's the way my brain works, if you put your hands across the tyre face, tread face, you've got something less than a two-hand span of contact between the tyre and the road. You know, maybe the palm of your hand, maybe palm and a half at any given moment. When you stop and think that these cars in vague terms are, with the driver and the fuel, 1.5 tonne.
A little bit of locking in the next gear.
Just fix that time up again.
When you picked up the throttle, just had a little fluff in third gear. Otherwise, it was good.
Yeah, so that's a little comment there, wasn't it, about the engine drivability, wasn't it? Out of third gear, he was saying, a little fluff. So what's really important, and we heard Craig Lowndes talking about it from the first session, is a replay of Jamie Whincup. And that's clearly too fast, but that's, look, everybody does that down there because you're actually trying to find right at the threshold how deep you can be into there, and that was just a little bit too deep there for Jamie. But Craig was talking about the drivability coming off the hairpin, and there are two aspects of it. The first bit of is not to burst into wheel spin in first gear and control the wheel spin with throttle control. And then the second bit is making sure that the engine drivability is nice, that as you pick second gear and third gear, that it doesn't either fluff or wheel spin again. So there's some work to do there for Shane to make sure that the car drives out of the hairpin nicely.
In the engine control units that manage the engines in these cars, the ECU, there's what's described as a map, and they can play with the air-fuel ratios, and so they'll just be looking to eliminate any little flat spots or little misfires to make sure that drivability is ideal. Back on board now with Scott McLaughlin, car number 17, turn 6, currently sitting in third and peeling off. He's 0.2 of a second behind Van Gisbergen and Whincup, so Red Bull continuing with their fine form at this racetrack. Ludo Lacroix in the foreground with the setup sheet, taking note of how things unfold in the session. Go back to Cam Waters now. He's sitting in 11th. And he's 0.4 of a second away. It's crazy when you think that 0.4 of a second is enough to put you back outside the top 10. But in fact, on that lap, Cam's just jumped up now. He's only 0.3 away. He's jumped up into 8th position. His former teammate Mark Winterbottom is in behind him in 9th. James Courtney is in 10th. Mostard's in 11th position at the moment.
One of the things that's, if we can just stay with this car for the braking area down at turn 6, because one of the things that looks like as a setup tool, given that the single spring is making people get, no, he's backed it off, but it looks like Tickford are using the bump rubber in the shock absorber to limit the amount of front travel. So you basically trick the car by putting something that's effectively more solid in the front that tries to contain the amount of front pitch on weight transfer onto brakes. So they're trying to hold the front of the car up effectively, and it does look like that is part of the problem in terms of the amount of stability they've got down there. They've all been off the road down at turn 6, and that looks like they're holding it up artificially with the bump rubber.
Coming up now to 4.5 minutes remaining in the first practice session for the main drivers in the Tyrepower Tasmania SuperSprint. Symmons Plains Raceway. We're about 30 kilometres to the south of Launceston. Some people are cycling tyres up here at the moment. Reynolds just popped up into 4th position in preparation for a little happy hour blast, because there may be some weather this afternoon, so there may be the opportunity at the moment to get a read on where you're at when you've got a bit more grip available. So the only cars that are in the 50s at the moment are Van Gisbergen and Whincup, 50.8 and 50.9. There's 0.1 of a second between them. McLaughlin is next, he's 0.2 away from the fastest time. Then Reynolds, Pye, Coulthard next, then De Pasquale, followed by Waters, Winterbottom and Courtney. Lots of things to juggle this weekend on top of what Mark's discussing, the change year on year with the springs. We're reintroducing this weekend the process of elimination qualifying. That'll be a big feature in tomorrow's and Sunday's telecast. There's also rules around Parc Ferme, which Mark and Jess and Craig started this session. Time in professional motorsport. So when you're a strategist, when you're an engineer, when you're a mechanic, a driver, or a team owner, there's lots to juggle out there at the moment to be able to get everything glued together right and understand the nuances of all of those things. Any one of those changes is enough to manage in its own right, and how you go about it. You know, Mark's introduced another question earlier on in the commentary box. What happens if we do have a situation where we get a big variation in weather day on day, when you've got a freeze out in what you can change on the cars? And the reason why you'd want to change things when the weather changes is that you might want to soften it up, you might want to change the anti-roll bars, you might want to make shock absorber springs, change your cambers, maybe fiddle with the wings. There's lots of things that you might play with in order to be able to acclimatise to a fully wet track. Not going to be able to do that. That's actually part of the intrigue. So
totally.
That will keep them on their toes. Kelly's on his toes into turn 6 here at the moment. Courtney's just come up into 10th position, just inside 2 minutes remaining now. Rick's in 15th, in car 15. Van Gisbergen and Whincup, they're still the masters of the game here at the moment by a small margin over car number 17, Scott McLaughlin. Back to Mostert here in 15th, make that second. He was 15th just before I called it. He crossed the control line, made a liar of me. Thanks, Chaz. So 4 100ths of a second now between Van Gisbergen and Mostert. Will Davison, who's had a lot of 4s against his name so far this year in placings. He's 4th in the championship for Milwaukee Racing at the moment. Now Mostert is actually pressing on here as we go back, jump inside the Shell V-Power racing car. So keep an eye out for Mostert. He's in the mid-sector at the moment, but his first sector is actually better than Van Gisbergen. He might go to the top. 1 minute remaining now. Supercheap Auto have also changed the livery on the car this weekend. More black. Quite a lot of changes to the way in which the car's been presented. Personal best in the mid-sector. This is going to and it does. 50.7 to be the fastest. Adam DeBoro, engineer in the background. Lee Holdsworth's now come up into 6th position. Car number 14 on screen here at the moment is down in 19th at the moment. Tim Slade for Alliance Truck Parts and Freightliner. This is a better lap for him. Moves up 3 spots into 16th position. Camps race control, race director Tim Schenken in the background calling 30 seconds remaining in the session. So we've got a Mustang Mostert, a ZB Commodore in Van Gisbergen, the whopping margin between them, 7/100ths of a second. Whincup, McLaughlin, Reynolds, Holdsworth, Davison, Pye, Coulthard, and we've got Percat off at turn 4. Well and truly beached. They'll leave him there because the session's about to conclude. Jack Smith's done a nice job, Mark. He's 15th at the moment in car number 4 in the wild card.
It is a good job, absolutely. We've got 0.54, so half a second separates 18 cars. So numerical qualifying is going to be a premium. As we pick up on Nick Percat now, that must have been a yellow flag down there when Percat's gone off, because that would have had a yellow flag out for Lee Holdsworth.
You could hear in the background that he was locked up at various times on the approaching there as well. Back to Whincup, who's done more winning at this location than any other, and in fact Whincup might end up being the top dog here, because Whincup's times are better than anybody in the first 2 sectors. He's on target to go to number 1 here, and does, on a 50.75, 1/100th of a second faster than Mostert.
Okay, mate, end the session.
It's a Roland free weekend at Triple Eight this weekend, so Roland Dane's overseas at the moment, and they've clearly lost their raises as a result. Mark Dutton and David Cauchy with a bit of stubble down there.
Yeah.
So Whincup's done a nice job, a 50.75 to displace the man on screen, Chaz Mostert, by 0.0191, just a little over 100th of a second. That's crazy tiny margin between them. Then Van Gisbergen, then Scott McLaughlin, 50.95. Reynolds, Holdsworth, Davison, Pye, Coulthard, Di Pasquale. 0.4 of a second, as Mark mentioned a moment ago, just a tiny margin across the entire top 10 cars after the first of what will be our 2 practice sessions today. So another one to come. And with a little bit of a threat of late afternoon weather, that might have been a really telling session for everybody to get an understanding of their cars and the behaviour of them. Rick Kelly heads the next group, 11 through 20. Richie Stanaway at the bottom of it, 0.6 of a second behind. So just over half a second away from the fastest time is enough to put you down near the high teens and the 20s. It's crazy. And then Jack LeBrock just on 1 second away. Rihanna.
Thanks, Crumpos. Just going to interrupt Chaz Mostert here very rudely. Sorry, Chaz. Apologies there to interrupt your conversation. Pipped at the post by about 100th from Jamie Whincup, but there was a question mark coming into this weekend by the Tickford cars, so that must give you a little bit of confidence starting off.
You have no idea what tyres people run in that session. Obviously, it's the next one that matters for the weekend going into qualifying, but for me, it was just trying to get myself used to the supercar again. Obviously did 8 hours at Laguna Seca. I mean, driving a GT car is fairly different to one of these, so it was a bit hard at the start of that session, but found a bit of a groove towards the end. But yeah, we've probably still got a bit of work to do with our car, so yeah, we'll see how we go. It's good to roll out and be in the top 5, but yeah, like I said, I don't know where we're exactly at.
Given there has been some changes made to the cars with the centre of gravity test, can you feel that at all the first time out?
Not really supposed to talk about it. You're throwing me under the bus here. Yeah, look, for me, the biggest felt was just it's not my BMW Team Snitzer car, so it's a little bit different for me. So, like I said, just get myself re-used to it, and we'll see what the real problems are through the weekend. So, not too bad. A tyre always fixes a lot of dramas in these cars, so I'm glad to run a bit of better set at the end there.
You've done your best to be the best politician. Well done, Chaz.
Thank you. Yeah, vote Chaz, PM.
Scott McLaughlin, we were just talking just there, and I did notice when I was watching the vision in-car in your car, there was along your shift lights at the top, they were all red, other than when you, I think you got off the throttle, then they went away, so you had a bit of an issue there.
Yeah, we had a little dash page issue, so from basically the middle of the stint, probably after our first stint, I had no shift lights, no lock-up lights, and no start page. I didn't actually know what time I was doing. It's kind of like go-karts and stuff.
That's all right.
Yeah, it was all right. I think I went faster at one stage, so it was, hey, look, it's all good, but I do feel a lot more comfortable in there than where I was with you.
Really?
Yeah,
do you?
yeah.
Well, mate, just talking about that, you were standing down the hairpin for that co-driver session that I was having a little play around with. I turned the lights on mistakenly, mate. I didn't do it to get people out of the way.
I don't know
so, have you got any tips for me, other than brake a lot deeper?
Yeah, you were definitely a bit soft. No.
No, I agree.
No, look, you look pretty good out there, mate. Yeah. It's like you've done it for years.
I did do it for years. Hey, let's get back to you then. You haven't driven the car since obviously changes. It's the talking point of it all. Hard to get a reference being a very, very different racetrack to what you had at Melbourne. But any sort of first thoughts on the centre of gravity stuff?
Yeah, I'd be lying if I said I knew a difference. Yeah. So I'm not.
Too early.
Too early at the moment. Yeah.
Everything else for the car though, other than the technical stuff.
Straight away, I said like this has been a bit of not an amazing track for us, and I felt like that was the strongest we've rolled out. So I felt really good straight away. Just a dash issue probably hurt us at the end there. So when you're not shifting right and all that sort of stuff, it does make a difference, especially at a place like this where it's minuscules.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks.
Jamie Whincup, that was a massive lap at the end there to put yourself to the top of the timesheets by 200ths.
Yeah. No, the car's okay. It's reasonable, but it's not as nice as we'd certainly like. So we'll do a bit of work in between P1 and P2 to try to improve it. I think everyone's got a bit of a step to be made. Track's quite quick, only a couple of tenths off practice record. So on green tyres, I think that could be in threat.
I didn't want to ask you this question, but the previous two interviews touched on the centre of gravity debate that's going on. You've got massive feel. Can you notice the difference in that 6.7 kilos that's been added to your car, bud?
I won't bore everyone and talk about the same thing. So hopefully those boys are covered off on it. It is one of these category doing absolutely everything they can to make the parity as even as possible. And whatever we get dished out is what we get dished out. We'll focus on our job.
And in the real battle, you were P1 and Lounsey was P5, so you've won that one. Thanks, Jamie.
Thanks, mate. Cheers.
Will Davison, your brother warmed the car up nicely for you this morning. It seems you did a pretty good job.
Yeah, not a bad start. We sort of came here with our sort of eyes open, thinking, we had a really difficult round here last year amongst the whole Tickford group. So obviously a lot of changes in the mix. And yeah, off to a pretty good start. What we're going to see this weekend is a seriously close bunch of cars because this is a unique circuit here. So no, pretty happy with where we've ended. We made an improvement through the session. So I'll just throw all credit to AD. Yeah, I mean he just tuned it right up for me.
Now team boss Phil Munday isn't here this weekend. He is having a beautiful holiday somewhere much warmer than what it is here, but kindly the team have put a tribute to him on the car with Bubbalo fuel, so that's very nice.
Yeah, what do they like? Bubbalo wheels are good, but I don't know. What's Phil added to the mix?
I'm not sure. You'll have to tell us.
Yeah, I will later. I'll have a crack at one. Cheers.
Thanks, Will.
Thanks.
And Fabian Coulthard, one session down. I saw you throw another set of tyres there on towards the end, but that didn't seem to light your car up too much. So I think it went a bit slower. They were supposed to be better.
Yeah, I think there was a yellow flag out there on the last lap, and like everyone should, you slow down and proceed with caution, is what we did. So didn't get a lap in.
The car in general, though, around this place, I mean, coming to Tassie after Melbourne, I mean, such a contrast in racetracks. And this one, for me, it's always the intensity here is just, you feel like you're working so hard the whole time, there's no break. Is that what it felt like out there then?
I actually mentioned that to Mark, my engineer. I was like, I'm a bit puffed. It's very different.
Scotty was sweaty.
Yeah, it's a bull ring.
Yep.
It's on the go the whole time, whereas the Grand Prix you get a little bit of time to relax and things like that. We're not running any cool suits, so it's busy, but it's a lot of fun. It's a good little track. It's awesome that the crowd can see it from pretty much any vantage spot around the place. So hopefully we can put on a good show.
Thanks, bud.
No worries, cheers.
Yes, there is certainly